Now, before we talk about homesteading, I think it's important to define what capitalism is, because a lot of people seem to misrepresent it. They say it's about free trade and natural organic interactions between individuals. And it's what happens when you just leave people alone and you get the government out of people's bloody lives. What capitalism is it's defined by the private ownership of the means of production. So the means of production could be factories that make clothes, it could be coal mines, it could be farms, and then how that food is distributed. So the kinds of property relationships we see under capitalism is a group of private owners of a factory or a mine who don't actually have to do any physical labor in the mine, but they have a strata of managers, bosses, and employees underneath them that do the labor. The profits that are generated from that business are then distributed to the private owners. What is the moral justification for these kind of private property arrangements we see in today's world? Well, our pro-capitalists tell us that it comes through homesteading, the original acquisition of land, and then the subsequent inheritance and trading of that land based on the decisions that are voluntarily agreed upon between the various traders. So what is homesteading? Homesteading is you find a vacant plot of land that no one has touched, no human anyway, and then you go mix your labor with the land, and because you own yourself and you own what you do, you're mixing yourself with the land, and you should have just ownership over that land. So if you plow a field or you put a fence up or you build a house, because that's your labor and you should be able to keep the fruit of your labor, it's unfair for anyone else to come up and start like taking away parts of your labor because it's part of yourself. And that's how you have the original just acquisition of private property in the mindset of our great capitalist thinkers. On the surface, it seems pretty, fair. You should be able to keep the fruit of your labor. It's it would suck if you work to build a house and then some asshole you don't know just like walks in and goes, "It's mine." It would suck. And so it does appeal to one's moral sensibilities that homesteading would be an okay way of acquiring property. The problem with homesteading as a justification for private property is, in terms of modern real-world capitalism, is that a lot of land wasn't acquired through homesteading. Most of it in the New World was acquired through violent conquest and genocide. The British coming to Australia and massacring the natives isn't really mixing your labour with the land, is it? It's a bit weird that pro-capitalists would talk about homesteading when it wasn't at all the norm. It didn't actually happen very much. Most of it just happened through mass murder. You mix your murdering with the land and then it becomes yours. It's still quite often used by pro-capitalist thinkers to talk about homesteading to justify modern capitalism. Because if you're a pro-capitalist and you're mixing your labour with your imagination and ignorance and racism, you can ignore the historical genocides. But let's say homesteading actually did occur. Would that be a suitable system to run society and base property relations on? I think I have some problems with it. Let's use this thought experiment. So let's say there's an island 100 square miles. It's completely vacant. Some human beings come and they settle it. They mix their labour with the land. What happens after the second generation, where people die and they've got to pass over what they own to the next generation, where the population might have increased? And, Stefan, say he's one of the homesteaders. He's got two kids. He's got one kid, Bill, and one kid, Stefan Jr. And let's say Stefan doesn't like Stefan Jr. He thinks he's egotistical, narcissistic, and pretentious, but he really loves his son, Bill. And so he cuts his son, Stefan Jr., out of the will, and Stefan Jr. doesn't get to have any land. So in this world, Stefan Jr. would kind of be a perpetual trespasser because all the land is privately owned by individuals on this homesteaded island. So Stefan Jr., he can't live in a vacuum. He needs to eat. A human being lives off the environment. He needs to put in minerals and calories and food into his body to live and drink water. but Stefan Jr. doesn't have access or ownership over any of this where he can access it independently. He has to have the permission of the people who own property to be able to access the means of life. So he goes up to his brother, Stefan Jr. He goes, "Hey Bill, could I, maybe get some of the corn you're growing?" And Bill says, "No mate, it's not a fucking charity, all right? I'm running the profit motive." Remember how Dad talked about how the profit motive was like really good? So what we're going to do is you're going to work for me. You have to give me something. And Stefan Jr. goes, "Well, I own myself. I can sell myself to you, and you can order me around, and then you can trade me something for me selling myself to you." And Bill goes, "That's a great idea. You are just like my dad." So basically, Bill gets Stefan Jr. to plow the field all day long. Stefan Jr. is just plowing the field just all day, 7 days a week. He's plowing that field, and he's sleeping in the barn as part of his payment. And Bill, at the end of the week, gives him, a few bits of corn for him to live. Now, the pro-capitalists, because they have an absolute kind of concept of private ownership, is an absolutely you cannot violate a private owner's property. That is just immoral. It's the aggression. It's aggression to do that. We believe in the non-aggression principle. You cannot violate someone's property. So Stefan Jr. is like working really hard. He's plowing in the field. He's mixing his labour with the land. He's mixing his labour. And Bill's sitting up on Daddy's porch, just watching Stefan Jr. and just sitting back going, "Yeah, free trade. Yeah, free market. Free market's happening right there. Hey, Stefan Jr., how good is the free market? Yeah, the invisible hand. And Stefan Jr. is going, "This is voluntary. This is a voluntary agreement." And he's plowing that field. Eventually, a situation develops on this homesteaded island where there is power centralized in the property owners, those who inherited property, and those who didn't inherit property, the non-property owners. They have all the power, while the non-property owners don't have any social power. The non-property owners are reliant on the property owners to be able to access the means of life of the property owners. So this creates a massive power imbalance where, pro-capitalist thinkers like to tell us that all transactions in the market, whether they be renting out a house or selling yourself, where you sacrifice your freedom of speech, your right to free association and self-determination for 8 to 10 hours a day under someone else's command, this is voluntary. I think that notion is false when we have a property owning class and a non-property owning class. Because, consider this thought experiment. Stefan Jr. is walking through the desert, right? And he needs water. And again, he sees his brother Bill, who has the only water available. He's just got a spring of water that just comes out of the ground, which he found. Or maybe he homesteaded it, who knows? And Stefan Jr. goes, "Hey, can I have some water please, Bill?" And Bill says, "Mate, it's not a fucking charity, all right? Okay, we have to, I'm running this out of profit, mate." And so Stefan Jr. goes, "Oh, okay, well, what can I do for you?" And Bill goes, you see that clogged up toilet? You see that? And Stefan Jr.'s like, "Oh, do you want me to unblock it?" And Bill goes, "No, I want you to eat the poo, please. I want you to eat that poo." And Stefan Jr. goes, "That is degrading, humiliating. How could you do this to me? I want some water, please. I'm going to take that water." And then Bill says, "If you do that, you're violating the non-aggression principle. This is my private property, this water here. You need to provide me with a service. Eating the poo is very entertaining to me. Can you please do that? Have some respect for my private property. I'm not happy. I don't want your violence here." And so Stefan Jr. has to eat the poo before he can get what he needs to live, which the property owner has what he needs to live. So there's a power imbalance in terms of the kinds of interactions and exchanges they have, where because Stefan Jr. doesn't have any other option, it's not voluntary. So capitalists will go, "Okay, you know, some pro-capitalists will go, well, in that instance where it's life or death, you can violate the water. Or surely a human being wouldn't be such an asshole and would give them water because they have, you know, a compassionate human being. Well, I mean, you're relying on the charity of those with power. I mean, I wouldn't think that's a guaranteed way of having a socially optimum society where one group of people have all the power and you're relying on them and their generosity to just kind of throw a bit of power, a bit of crumbs to the poor and the impoverished. Capitalist thinkers will look at my thought experiments and go, oh, that's not real capitalism. It wouldn't happen like that. You're creating a straw man and then knocking it down. Well, I mean, I do think it does illustrate the power relations between those who own property and those who don't. When you're born into the world and you don't own any property, and you might not have the money or the wealth to get a good education to make your skills more valuable in terms of your bargaining position with those in power. So, you know, obviously a doctor is scarcer and is more necessary in society than someone who has no skills. And, you know, that person with no skills has to do really shitty jobs for really low wages, and they don't really have an opportunity to necessarily further themselves. It seems that this homesteading principle does little to explain or justify the kinds of property relations we see in today's world, when the whole reason it had moral appeal to people is because it's about an individual being able to keep the fruit of their labor. But now in modern real world capitalism, you have a situation where someone's born into the world inheriting millions, or they manage to climb the corporate ladder and provide a service to the people at the top, the economic elites in society, where they're not actually mixing their labor with shit all, and yet they're getting the benefits of other people who have to sell their labor to those elites that have a lot. I mean, the question is, what is a state? What is a nation state? What is a state? I mean, in that thought experiment with all the homesteaded land on the island, where after a few generations you get a division between property owners and non-property owners, is that not resembling what a state looks like, where you have an uncountable authority making decisions on behalf of everyone, where the non-property owners don't get much of a say in what happens in the day-to-day economic affairs of the world or the political affairs of the world because they don't have the power, the social power to influence people? I mean, are anarcho-capitalists really anti-state, or do they just want to see a kind of more kind of oligarchical kind of feudalist kind of absolutism of property owners over non-property owners? We should, you know, look at the relations between those that own the productive property in society and how they have power over those who own nothing, and how those who own nothing have to provide the labour that makes the property owners even richer. I think we should maybe question that and then ask ourselves, is capitalism really freedom? Or is it simply the freedom to exploit? I don't know. Maybe capitalism is wonderful and there's no alternative. There's nothing that could ever resemble anything apart from capitalism that could ever work, and that I'm a fool, I'm wasting my time, and I should get a fucking real job. Anyway, thanks for watching. I know that I'm an idiot, and one day I hope I can not be an idiot and become a great man. One day I hope to be a great wise man. Definitely a man, because masculinity, oh boy, well that's another fucking bag of chips that's brain fucked everyone. Thank you.